I'm Jason Aponte. That's Jordan Elliott, the defensive tackle and NBC Sports Bay Area writer. Jordan, it's been a minute, my boy. What's up with you?
Just another day. I wish I could take credit for the defensive lines, Jordan Elliott's contributions, but I'm just the writer, Jordan Elliott, unfortunately.
No, honestly, it's so cool to know that you've been able to get into the locker room, be credentialed, all that stuff, man. Again, I've said it many times. Nobody deserves it more than you for the work that you put in and the way that you conduct yourself and everything. I'm super proud of you, man.
I appreciate it, dude. We've had some humble beginnings, so it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, from writing notes in a training camp up on the up on the the bleachers, to them thinking that we're Seattle Seahawks spies, which they might know about Seattle Jordan. But hey, we're not going to talk about all that right now or whatever. But obviously, the first thing that we're going to talk about is the injury report. Obviously, we'll get into the stuff about Keion White because I do think that Jordan Elliott has some good news for us based on the fact that he's probably watched every single snap. Kind of funny that that's taken on a life of its own. I just want to make sure that we understand where it came from, and whenever you see somebody use it, it's Jordan's thing. But let me run through this, and it's going to take a while. So if it takes me a little while to get through this, please, just bear with me. Ben Barch, limited participation. Sounds like he has a chance to play at left guard. Jake Brendel did not participate, hamstring. Spencer Burford, full participation. Sounds like he's on his way back. Alfred Collins did not participate. Kalia Davis, full participation. Jordan Elliott, limited participation with an ankle. Yetur Gross Models did not participate. Bryce Huff did not practice. Jawan Jennings, full. Mac Jones, full. George Kittle, full. Christian McCaffrey did not participate, resting. Sam Okwanu did not participate. Ricky Pearsall did not participate. Brock Purdy limited. Upton Stout limited. Keion White limited, not injury related. Trent Williams did not participate, resting. D Winters knee did not participate. What, if any, jumps out right at you off the bat that you at least are concerned about for their status on Sunday?
This might be a hot take for 49ers fans, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I think the Niners need Jake Brendel back, dude. I think that Jake Brendel is a lot better than he gets credit for. I think that he's somebody that's just it's kind of like a snowball effect where, hey, he's not perfect and he's had reps where he probably didn't look great. There's just this prevailing narrative that he's like terrible. And I think that there's plenty that you could point to on tape the last couple of weeks that he's been out that would lead me to believe that he is missed more than maybe people would want to admit. So I would say for sure not having him around isn't ideal. I think especially too when you're talking about Kyle's offense and you're talking about the fact that that center is tasked with calling out the protections and with being the person that makes those adjustments on the fly at the line of scrimmage. I think it gets glossed over, and I think the thing that's interesting to me is that people jump all over Brendel. I see it all the time, dude. I'm on Twitter all the time, unfortunately, and so I see it all the time. Like Matt Hennessy steps in, and a lot of the same mistakes that Brendel was making are being made by him, and it's just like I just think that again, it's one of those things where there's a prevailing narrative about a player. People are going to stick to their guns about it. So I would say out of all of those listed, that's the one where I'm kind of like, hey, hopefully he's back sooner rather than later, because I do think if you turn on that Texans tape, there's a pretty glaring hole right in the center of that offensive line.
Jordan, why would you say something so controversial and so brave? Because I mean, it's literally the entire fan base, their mind is made up. And you're on the other side of this saying, I don't think it's that bad. It's you, it's Rich Madrid, it's a few people who, they can and we've seen this happen with Mike McGlinchey, right? Like we've seen this happen with Mike McGlinchey where when Mike McGlinchey gets tossed on one rep, but the 62 other reps were really good, people are like, "Oh, he's trash" and everything as well too, right? But it's just interesting that that's where you started because for me, the thing I'm most concerned about is Ricky Pearsall, man. It's going on 4 weeks now here with this PCL sprain. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not gonna say anything definitive about what he should be doing, but he just not practicing at all. And you know what? Maybe it's for the best because I don't want Ricky Pearsall or Brock Purdy going anywhere near MetLife Stadium. Like in fact, I don't even want them traveling to the state of New York or New Jersey. That's how scared I am of that turf. But you'd have to like at least say you're a little concerned about Ricky Pearsall right now because it's going on 4 or 5 weeks and nothing right now. And the 49ers need him right now and could use him so much with this offense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's one of those things where, for me personally, at least, when he first got that injury, it figured like it was going to be a week to week thing, and that would be something, maybe he'd miss a game, maybe two, and then he'd be back. And so I would agree that there is concern that, obviously these things aren't black and white, and we never know right off the bat. And there's obviously going to be rehab and things can get complicated, or you could have setbacks during that. But I would be interested to know if this is just the initial injury that he's still being held out from, or if there was some sort of setback as he was trying to work back. Because it didn't seem like it would be this long of an absence when he first got ruled out, at least to me anyway.
Yeah, and it looked like he just banged his knee, right? And it felt like, hey, that might be a bone bruise, a contusion. I'm not, again, the severity. I'm not a doctor. I don't know the timeline, anything like that. And to be fair, that's exactly what happened to Christian McCaffrey last year in Buffalo. Is he hits his knee and it's a PCL. He's done for the season. But yeah, like him not being out there at all, it's I think it's compounded with the fact that he looked so good when he was playing, and he looked like the guy who was ready to take the next leap. And now, here we are going into, what is this, week 9 now? Like we're now talking about, man, is he ever going to come back? And I think he will. It just sucks to, again, for an ascending player. Now, I have to ask you, Ben Barch sounds like he has a chance to come back. I think we were all excited about Connor Colby, but I think we need Ben Barch back. That could be really helpful at left guard and could help with a lot of the things that were going on the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's always going to be a need for experience, and I think it's a tall ask to expect a guy who was a seventh round rookie to just step in right away, and especially in a run game that's going to be as diverse and complex as what Shanahan's asking this offense to do. You want somebody that has experience in the system. You want somebody that has experience on Sundays. And just there's a lot of little nuances that go into being a pro, and I don't think there's some players that make the leap right away. There's a seamless transition for a few guys, but those are an exception. It shouldn't be expected or the rule. And so yeah, I think there's been times where it's been pretty evident that Connor Colby's a day three rookie that's kind of finding his footing, but he's also done some things that would make you feel encouraged that he can be a guy that can be a contributor going forward. But I just don't think you should be in a spot ever as an organization where you are expecting the seventh round rookie to just hit the ground running. You might be in a
Mhm.
spot where they're play or they have to play just because of injuries and things like that. But I don't think it's good business to ever expect them to hit the ground running and contribute from day one. And I don't think that's what the 49ers did. I just think, unfortunately, it was it was the cards they were dealt, and it was the best option they had. And I think that they've tread water as good as they could, him included, in that time.
It's kind of crazy that Spencer Burford got hurt on special teams. You would have thought that he might have been the first option off the bench at left guard, but apparently he had impressed enough, during training camp and the preseason. Where, while I agree with you, they shouldn't be relying on a seventh round rookie. But they certainly felt like they were confident enough to say, hey, like let's get him out there. And obviously Burford's coming back, so it's interesting because I think we found out today that Drew Moss was the person that was waived for the trade for Keion White, and that would make Moss and Kobe. Well, Moss is gone, but Kobe's still there, and he probably is going to go back to the bench. Again, I think it all turns itself back into the discussion about the 49ers and their investment on the offensive line, right? It's still an investment when it's a sixth, seventh rounder. But again, it's another person that's not there, right? Like, and he's not going to make it now. I think that's roster stuff. He could probably fall back to the practice squad. I mean, we thought Travis Gibson was going to get by. That was a crazy few hours. We were like really crashing out over the fact that Travis Gibson was poached by the Carolina Panthers, just showing how down bad the 49ers defensive line was. But I think the discussion that I'm trying to bring up, I would say, is just about how much of the actual investment in the line is an issue, because I kind of pointed out the New Orleans Saints, they've been using first and second round picks on all of their linemen, essentially. Trevor Penning and Cesar Ruiz and Kelvin Banks and Fuaga, who actually was a second team All Pro, and that line hasn't pulled itself together with cohesion. So where do you stand, I guess, with the whole investment? Like, do you stand with the people that just say, hey, you need to start drafting every first round offensive line, or is it a little bit more nuanced than that?
I think it's definitely nuanced. I think that, you could say that for any position group, like, oh, they should take this guy in the first round. Maybe they need better receivers in the first round. Maybe they need better corners in the first round. The thing with offensive linemen is that like there's a huge drop off every year. Like there's a few guys that go scattered around like the top 15 or so. And then after that, there's usually a pretty big drop off. I know Simmons out of Ohio State probably fell a bit because of that injury, and the Chiefs were able to get him later than he probably would have went. So there's like instances like that where maybe you can capitalize on value or take a chance on a guy that, is a little hurt. But then on the flip side of that, if you take that guy, he's hurt, he never comes back, or he's not the same player, then you never hear the end of it for drafting an injured player.
That's exactly what
Um,
happened if the 49ers drafted him.
exactly. And so it's one of those things where I do think that, like the one that I always come back to, Jason, is that like they got Trent Williams and they on multiple occasions gave Trent Williams massive contract to be the bookend left tackle, to be the guy protecting the blind side. And I just think that you don't do that. You can't say that you're not invested in the O line when you're contributing that much money. Like, it then boils down to a philosophical thing. Maybe some people think, hey, instead of having the superstar, incredible left tackle, I'd rather have a couple above average players where you could spread that money out, maybe, and then have, you maybe take away an elite player at one position, but it gives you a slightly above average player at another position. And I think that's an interesting conversation. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that because I think there's just so many external factors. But I can't really get on board with the fact that they like haven't invested in the O line. And like I don't think Colton McKivitz is a great player, but I think he's been good. Like he's been worth the contract they gave him. I think he's been solid. I think that he's one of those guys where you're not really like talking about him a ton week to week, which as an offensive lineman, that's usually your goal because very rarely are people going to be, singing your praises. Usually if you're getting talked about a lot, it's because something glaring happened that you were at fault for or near the scene of the crime where people are just tying the whatever happened to you. And so, I would say that it really to me boils down to like what they do once Trent hangs it up, because I think that will be very telling about how much they really plan on investing in it, especially after giving Brock that big deal. I don't think you can afford to have a massive drop off at left tackle. And obviously nobody's going to be Trent Williams. Trent Williams
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most unique players that's ever stepped on an NFL field. He's should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. You're not going to be able to replace him. They were very fortunate to go from Joe Staley to Trent Williams. I don't see a scenario where they can do that a third time in a row. But I would expect them to probably try to invest in a veteran of some kind in free agency, because the other side of it is too, like, very rarely are you going to get a player that's going to step in from day one as an offensive lineman and be able to just hit the ground running week one as a rookie, right? And so without having access to, a top 5, top 10 pick, which the way the 49ers have been playing and usually the way they play when they're healthy, like they're not really picking in that range. Even last year, which was a, rough season for the 49ers, everybody would agree that was definitely a season they'd like to forget. They still weren't even picking in the top 10. So I just think it really boils down to how they allocate the resources that will eventually be freed up. And hopefully Trent Williams plays for 5 more years, because it's a ton of fun watching him and he's still playing at a very high level, in my opinion. But we can probably assume that his time is, going to come to an end in the next few seasons. And I think that's where it'll be very telling about how much the organization from top to bottom plans on allocating the resources they'll have when they're no longer paying a huge, hefty sum to their left tackle.
Well, I mean, that is an incredibly detailed answer as usual, backed by nothing but good research. But only thing that I got from it was congratulations, Spencer Burford. You are the starting left tackle next season for the San Francisco 49ers. Come on down. No, look, again, it is a weird situation to go from a Hall of Famer to a Hall of Famer, right? Like that's what they did with Staley and Trent, right? Like that's almost impossible to do. But you do have to start looking at what life looks like without him, right? Because you set your watch to it. Like even if people want to bring up like how many pressures he's given up, and it's already exceeded years past, it's still better than he's still better at the top of his position, like up there, right? So it's not like they're going to be able to just go get Penei Sewell or somebody else, or like it's just they've got to figure something out. So I wanted to ask you this, and then we'll get to the Keion White stuff. How do you feel about Brock coming back this week? What do you think his chances are?
Dude, that MetLife turf scares me.
Yeah,
I'm no
man.
doctor, no expert, but I just piecing the little that I, know and have heard from medical experts, it seems like turf toe and that hard surface don't really mesh very well. I don't think that any. win is a given. I don't think any team you can just chalk up as a scheduled win in the NFL. So I don't think it's fair to say that they should be able to win without Brock. Because the Giants have shown at times they're a scrappy team. They've been a team that's given they beat the reigning Super Bowl champions. I know it's a divisional game, but like they've had moments where they look pretty good. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily because the Giants are a bad team that the Niners should be able to win, but more so just that Mac has played at a high level and has been everything you could ask for in a backup, a guy that can step in, keep you in games. He's led them to a couple wins too, in my opinion, where he's really stepped up. Yeah, I just think that it wouldn't make sense because if you bring Brock back 2 weeks from now and he re-aggravates it, it would be very unfortunate and it would, obviously not be ideal. But if you do that against the Giants on that field where so many players have gotten hurt, obviously Bosa tore his ACL there a few years ago. It's just, to me, the optics of it are just terrible. And it's just
Yeah.
not some risk beyond I don't know if it's fair to say glaringly obvious risks from playing on turf because, again, I'm no expert, but just piecing things together probably would be best to wait one more week. And I do think that Brock gives the Niners offense something that Mac doesn't. And if they're both 100%, and I'm a big Mac Jones guy. Anybody who knows
Yeah.
me, I know Ruben knows big Mac Jones guy. He remembers. I still think Brock's better, and I'm still taking Brock. If both are
Yeah.
100%, I'm still starting Brock over Mac. But you should be able to win this week with Mac. I don't think that Mac playing over Brock is the difference in this game. If you're going to lose this game, there's a long list of things that would cause that before Brock Purdy not being under center, in my opinion.
100%. And shout out to Ryo. He's bringing it back. Black Splash Cousin was a movement. But you know what? Like looking at this game with the Giants, it does certainly feel like this is gonna be more of an Atlanta game plan. Trying to beat them up on the inside. Pause. Like like having a lot of more gap scheme runs. So I do think that that's kind of where the 49ers go in this one. And let's not get it twisted. This is personal for me. This is personal. Like you guys are I'm walking the streets around here, right? Like, my Instagram is filled with, some 49ers fans. For the most part, Giants fans, they're waiting to jump on me. So I'm looking at you, 49ers. Don't piss me off. Like, this is personal. You got to get this one, all right? But let's get to what everybody wants to hear about, man. Keion White. So obviously the 49ers need to make moves, healthy bodies. He's definitely a healthy body. He's been somebody who was a healthy scratch. Again, shout out to KP for the really like fortuitous call. Like that was crazy. Like, it almost felt like he knew something, but he was just putting the pieces together and then all of a sudden boom, Keion White, Cleveland Farrell, come on down and Super Bowl back on. But I know you delve into the tape, a lot. What did you come away with? Especially too, like I told people before, we did the show today. If you want some good Keion White tape, he did play the San Francisco 49ers last year, and he looked pretty good in that game as well too. And I think, I think it was Lombardi who came up with the actual quote of like Kyle talking very highly of Keion White, meaning that they've been had their eye on him. So, what did you see in what you were able to watch?
Yeah, I was honestly the big thing I keep coming back to is why the hell did New England trade him? I mean, I know there's scheme fit issues, and I know that there clearly was, something that led to them feeling like he wasn't going to fit into their future plans. But the player they gave up and the potential that's there and the return they got back to me is abysmal. And I do think that landing spot matters too. Like if they had traded him to a different team, I don't think maybe, if he went to like the Titans or something, maybe he's not going to end up being as good of a player. But I think this is a situation where we might look back on it a couple of years from now. And Patriots fans are going to be asking themselves, how the hell did this happen? Like, why did we give this guy up for just a pick swap on day three? The thing that really stands out to me is his versatility. I started with his rookie tape just because I wanted to get a sense of kind of like the player he was coming in early on before there really was a huge influence from the scheme and from those coaches there that probably are going to try to mold him into their system a little bit. And just an incredible athlete. He's really strong. He's 6'5", 285. His power is really on display. When he gets into guys' chest plates, you can really see that advantage he has. He's really good when he's converting speed to power. But what really, really stands out to me is this isn't a guy that's just winning with bull rushes. He has a very deep bag of pass rushing moves. Even just in the live, probably posted like 20 clips on my Twitter or so in the last day or so since the trade happened. And there were wins where he's winning with a swipe, where he's winning with rip moves, he's winning with inside spin moves. He's using hesitation, he's using eye manipulation, he's manipulating the stem of his rush. Like he has a very like strong repertoire when we're talking about pass rush moves. And I do think that when you get this far down the injury list with the this far down the depth chart because of injuries, that's when you start to see a huge difference in just the bag that some of these guys have when they are going up against other teams, offensive linemen. And it's a lot like baseball, right? Like you can't just keep pumping heaters down the middle. You got to throw in a changeup every once in a while. And this guy has 3 or 4 breaking balls that I think would give even elite left tackles and right tackles in this league a problem from the edge. I know a lot's been made of him, rushing from the interior. I do think that your plan of attack is going to be different rushing from the inside. So I think he can win from everywhere pretty much. I saw him. I have reps of him on tape that I watched just from a few games, winning as a 9 tech, as a 5 tech, as a 4 eye, as a 2 eye, as a 3 tech. Like he's lining up all over the defensive front and he's winning everywhere. And that's why I keep coming back to like, how the hell did this team give up on this guy in year 3? And he had a I think 6.6% pressure rate as a rookie. It jumped up to 10.5% last year, and then this year it's only at 3%. So something clearly changed. I don't know if it was schematic, philosophical, where he's being used, but this looks like a really good player, dude. And I'm like astounded that the 49ers were able to get him for what they did. Cue that John Lynch on the sideline gif and throw that thing everywhere like the bat signal, because this guy might have just pulled off another heist, dude.
The thing is when you look at the Christian Barrymore, and then they signed Milton Williams. Milton Williams has to play. You've paid him a ton of money, right? And then you have Harold Landry at the edge, and I feel like this year they kept on using him as an edge, strictly an edge, right? Like, and trying to get him to win from there, right? And then I start to think about the roster politics part of it, right? Mike Vrabel took over, and his defensive coordinator, they're not tied to him at all, Keion White, right? Like they're not tied to him. So if he falls out of favor for whatever reason, whether it's attitude, whether it's just style of play, whether it's, I do think that, the little bit that I was able to see, because it's hard finding his snaps now on the tape, this year, because he's played so little. He was a healthy scratch 2 weeks ago. In run defense, he's kind of like freestyling a little bit, and he's not necessarily just, I guess what they're asking him to do is hold a gap, and I think that's what the 49ers are going to ask him to do, is just, hey, listen, this is your gap, play your gap and just go. So I do think that there is at least that's going for him, but I do think it was a little bit of roster politics, and I really dismiss the notion of people who, because he fell out of favor somewhere else, and it's like, oh well, they didn't want him, so why is he going to be good here? It's like, dude, Bryce Huff didn't work with Vic Fangio, and look at what you were getting out of him, because they were putting him in the right spots to win. And I do think situation matters. And if you're looking at the Omenihu thing, and I know everybody's saying Omenihu and Key, I think those are valid examples because of how the 49ers were able to get the most out of them. I think it's just up to Chris Kosuric and Robert Saleh to actually maximize what they can get out of him, because he's going to get a ton of run. I mean, I know he just got here, but congrats, buddy. Sunday, you're gonna get every snap that you want. You're gonna be playing all over the field. So, I hope he's in good shape, because he's gonna have to make an impact right away. You expect Cleveland Farrell to be, brought up from the practice squad, and then hopefully in the next week. And this is what I'm trying to tell people. I guess I'm just talking about the cascading effect of these moves, and what you should be expecting is, yes, those guys are going to play on Sunday, but then Huff comes back. YGM comes back. Sounds like probably somebody like Arden Key, someone else is going to be here. The sum of the parts of this defensive line jumps up. And now all of a sudden you have something that you can work with. And it's clear the 49ers realized that they couldn't run out the pass rush that they had out there in Houston, just based on, and again, guys are just banged up. Like, they're running out of bodies. So I do think there is optimism for this defensive line, not only for the names, but it's just the veteran leadership and the guys still, like, even a name that I'm like coming back to. And I think that the 49ers should at least bring in for a tryout. He's a body at the edge, Shaq Barrett. Like, Indianapolis just had him 7 days ago out at their facility to see what and Indianapolis defense is great, like this season. So, the more that you bring in bodies, the more that you bring in guys who have played in this league, you start to feel better about it, because you know that they're in good hands with Robert Saleh. But again, I'm gonna throw this at Chris Kosuric, man. You got to make this work, right? Like, if we're gonna get the most out of Keion White, let's get it, because you've done it before, and we know that you have a reputation. But I still feel far better about this defensive line and what could possibly happen moving forward.
Yeah, and it's also like it'll help them now, but it's also like he's under contract for next year. And I think one of the things
It's
you need
true.
to look at, it gives you another guy that can do what I would assume they drafted Michael Williams for, which you can kind of move all over. You're a chess piece on the line. You can kick inside and rush when you hopefully do have a Nick Bosa and a Bryce Huff kind of edge rusher as your bookends. And so to me, what that also does is it allows you to maybe cut back a little bit on Michael Williams' usage and let him get a breather because that's a D line that's well rested and a D line that's going to have a little bit more gas in the tank. Obviously, is going to be better, especially as the game goes on, as the season goes on. So it's like you're almost getting insurance for Michael Williams too, and getting a player where you can seamlessly swap them in and out in a lot of those same alignments on the defensive front. And at that price too, it's like, hey, if this doesn't work out, like I don't think anybody's going to be complaining when the draft rolls around and the Niners are picking 40 picks later or whatever it is than they would have been before. Like it's one of those
Hmm.
things where the cost and the risk reward here is heavily in favor of the 49ers. And again, I'm like asking myself, I know that the recent return on investment hasn't been great in terms of production from Keion White. Like this season, there's not a ton you can point to that you probably get excited about, but like he's put a lot of really great reps on tape the last couple seasons prior to this, and he's still like really young player with a ton of mileage on his body, you'd assume. So this is the best the Patriots could have gotten. Like that's where I'm kind of confused. I'm like, nobody was willing to give up a little bit more than this. And
Hmm.
maybe the Niners just got lucky and struck while the iron was hot, but he looks like a really good player. And it's one of those things where I am like it's there something's too good to be true. Like that's what this
Yeah.
feels like. It's like
Yeah.
how get the player that has this deep of a pass rushing bag that can line up all over,
They're
is
like, just
athletic.
take him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where's the red flag? Is there a red flag that we're missing? And that's where I'm kind of like, it has to be something behind the scenes
Hmm.
because from what we're seeing on tape, like, this is a player that can contribute. And, you're not expecting him to go out there and get 10 sacks this year, but like, he can contribute. And right now, that's what they need. And they need a guy that can win in different ways. And that's the biggest thing that I would say stands out to me is again he's winning with cross chops and swipes and rips and there's a spin move he did against Seattle week 2 of last year. He had a really good game against Seattle last year. So it's just one of those things where I'm like astounded that this is a guy where it's not like you're just betting on, oh, he has physical traits and we're hoping we could piece it together. Like no, he has the pass rushing repertoire to just step in and contribute. So I really hope it translates to what it looks like it's capable of being because this might end up being a move we look back on a couple years from now, like we did with Amenahue, where it was like, remember when they got Amenahue, it didn't, it was an earth shattering move. And he was a guy that didn't really have a ton of production to that point with Houston before coming over. But Charles Amenahue was instrumental in them, reaching back-to-back NFC Championship games and having a couple really good seasons and good playoff runs. He was a huge part of that, and I think that we might look back on this Keion White trade 2 or 3 years from now and feel very similarly.
Hell yeah, this sounds like all good news, by the way. Almost 30 minutes in here. Thank you guys for joining. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell for when we go live. Got Jordan Elliott of NBC Bay Area Sports giving us nothing but good news about why the 49ers are back because Keion White is in the fold. All right, I've got to ask you because Kyle Shanahan was asked in the press conference about it, about Juwan Jennings, who everybody seems to keep floating out there with their idea of a trade target. Where are you at with the Juwan Jennings stuff and the way that his year has really transpired? Because we're here on October 29th with, and it seems like a lot of people have a very different opinion of him before, from before training camp.
Man, this is a tough conversation, I think, because I think there's a lot at play here that, it's difficult to fit into the nuance of a discussion like this. And so if you're just going based off how he played this season, I understand why there's frustration because he's a guy that was so reliable for so long. When Debo and Ayuk were here and healthy and Kittle was healthy, he was a guy that he was fourth in the pecking order for targets, but when he was getting the ball, he was a guy that was extremely efficient because he was making those tough, gritty third down catches. He was the guy that was stepping up in the red zone. He, in my opinion, if the Niners won that Super Bowl against the Chiefs a couple years ago, he should have been the Super Bowl
Super been
MVP if they
MVP.
won the game. And so it's really hard to go from that to what we've seen this year, where it's just like, he's dropping balls, and things happen. I don't think it's a huge deal, but like that little sideline incident he had with Kyle where they're kind of jawing at each other. There's just like a lot of things that are very uncharacteristic to the player that, 49ers fans have grown accustomed to watching since he's been here. And I think the thing that makes it so hard too is he embodies so much of what has made the 49ers successful over the last few seasons. Most NFL teams have a couple blue chip players, right? Some have more than others, but most have those superstar players. But what really separates the elite teams from the middle of the pack is having those guys that have stories like Juwan Jennings, where they come in as a day 3 pick, they get cut, they're on the practice squad, they're having to grind their way up, they're having to earn these reps over years and years, and ultimately getting rewarded with a nice contract and getting extended and all these things that he worked hard for years, doing the gritty things, blocking and doing the things that maybe don't show up in a box score but have been pivotal in them winning. And so I do think that's an area where it's hard to see the amount of people that have kind of turned on him, because it's like, man, this guy was kind of everything the 49ers stood for, and this culture that they've built has really been about. I will say this, Jason, I'd love your opinion on it too. How much of this is just the fact that he hasn't really gotten to play with Brock all that much this year? Because him and Brock have a special connection. I think that him and Brock, if he was playing this way this season with Brock starting every game, I'd feel entirely differently than I do now. And this
Mhm.
isn't any knock on Mac Jones. I don't think this is a quarterback issue. I just think that there's a level of chemistry that he's had with Brock that I haven't seen with him and Mac, and I think is, realistic to expect. They haven't had a lot of time to work together. Again, no knock on Mac Jones. Is it as simple as that? Is there just a lack of chemistry right now between quarterback and receiver that's causing this? Because when we've seen Purdy throwing the ball the last couple of years, it's not looked like this. It's looked a lot different.
Right. It's funny because I do think it's a lot of factors. I never considered that one. And I think the reason that some people might scoff at that is because that throw that Mac had in the Houston game, which that's got you got to come down with that, especially when you and the contract demands be damned, but like that's indicative of the type of player that you think you are, right? Like the type of player that you want to be represented as, you want to be known as, right? And like those guys that make that amount of money, whatever it is that you're looking for, you got to bring that in. I never thought about that. I really didn't think about that at all. Like I think there's so much going on here. I think one, the injuries, clearly, that he's talked about, he's been pretty open about, the non-training camp, the starting slow off of the injuries and everything as well too. It could be the thing with Mac, the frustration of knowing that this season was supposed to be your kind of, hey, I'm playing the cards right, I'm gonna cash in this contract because I've got free reign and all this runway to these targets and everything, and then realizing in that Tampa Bay game that it's like week 6, and you have like how many catches, and you realize that these incentives that you've built up may be out of reach. And I do think it's a bunch of those things. I don't necessarily like I've grown frustrated with the way that he's played, because he'll tell you he hasn't played his best football, right? Like, and he can definitely play better. But I do think that like it's not as simple as all those things, right? And I've watched how quickly people have kind of turned and gave him the diva accusations, and I seems to be faster than the Brandon Ayuk stuff, right? Like, and it almost felt that same exact way. And again, Brandon Ayuk was trying to get paid, but yeah, I never considered really that with the whole Brock thing, and I just think that there's so many things going on right now, between the injuries, between the pressure he's probably putting on himself, maybe because of the chemistry with Mac. I do kind of feel like it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more loaded than it is as clear black and white. But regardless, this is a production league. When you're not producing, that's all they, people aren't, when you go to the bargaining table, right, next year for his contract, he's not going to be able to tell people like, hey, I was pressing and I was banged up, and they're just going to be like, dude, the drops, this is your tape, this is what we're going off of, and this is how we feel. So I think he's feeling all of that, and I think it's all starting to catch up to him, because we are in week 9, and you only have a certain amount of weeks to get things done. So I do think that's a good point, though. I just never thought of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things again where, like, I know there's very subtle things that I think could be contributing to it, where it's just like, there's very fine-tuned nuances to route running and where you're throwing in the system and the timing of it. And so maybe, there's a play where he's not getting a certain amount of depth that Mac Jones might be expecting, but Purdy's grown accustomed to, where, it's a bread and butter play maybe in the scheme where Brock might know, like, hey, maybe he's not getting the depth that's, word for word in the install, but I've played with him. I have a feel for knowing where he's going to be. And again, this is just, I'm not saying I think this is the driving factor behind it. I'm just wondering, like, hey, like, could this be an instance where it is just something as simple as that? I know Rich posted a clip where, like, that, I think it was that deep post where he flattened his route a little bit and wasn't at the landmark that you would be accustomed to seeing within the install and the way it's coached up. But maybe that's something, the amount of reps that Brock has had with him over multiple seasons versus somebody like Mac Jones who's stepping and getting kind of thrown into the fire with it, might know that and might have a better feel for that. And the margin for error with some of this stuff is so thin. Like, I think that's one area that always fascinates me is just how fast these decisions have to be made and how small the margin for error is, and just one step off here, one, firing off the line a millisecond later than you normally would. It makes all the difference in the world. And no matter how many football games I watch over the years, it will never cease to amaze me how fast this game is and how easy it is to throw on tape the day or two after. I'm like, oh, why did this guy miss this receiver? Why did this guy miss this block? It's a lot harder in real time. And I think without those reps together, that could be a reason why we're seeing it. But at the same time, too, I don't think that you can just chalk it up to that. Like, there's been balls that you'd expect Juwan Jennings to catch. And I think he'd be the first person to say, I should be catching these balls. He's earned that reputation. And part of the reason why I think it is so disappointing for 49ers fans watching is because they're like, dude, I've seen you catch balls like this getting drilled over the middle, contested situations, big critical third downs when the lights are the brightest in the Super Bowl. Like, and so it's almost like you're a victim of your own success at that point, where you've built this reputation as being Mr. Reliable. So all of a sudden, when you have this pattern of not living up to that, I think it's going to be a lot more alarming than, I think Demarcus Robinson's dropped a few balls he should have caught this year. And I don't think that the reaction to Demarcus Robinson dropping a ball is going to be the same as Juwan Jennings dropping a
I
ball,
agree.
because 49ers fans have just grown to expect more from Jennings.
Yeah, and then you couple that with the contract holdout or the negotiations and all that stuff. I do think one other factor that I forgot to bring up is how quickly Kyle Shanahan got Kendrick Bourne 140 yards, back to back weeks. And obviously he has rapport with Mac. We're not, but I think Juwan's seeing that as well too. Like, I've never had 140 yards like that back to back weeks. And again, I could just be grasping at nothing. But I do think you do look around and you start to see who's in the room with you and what's going on. And you start to feel like, hey, maybe they're starting to think that maybe I'm phased out, or maybe like they don't need me as much. And again, I do think this is on the heels of like him knowing that this was his real opportunity to secure a very big contract. Like, if he goes out there and he puts up like another season like he did last year, clears 1,000 yards, is that guy in the blocking game, I think there'll be plenty of teams that would, line up for that. I still think that people will, inquire about him, and he's certainly going to get a contract next year. It's not like he's going to be out of the NFL, but I do think the pent up frustration has a little bit to do with the pressure that he's put on himself. Also, Kendrick Bourne's off the street, 140 yards, 140 yards. I know again that, obviously he has rapport with Mac Jones, but I start to think that seeps into his mind a little bit in terms of, man, like I'm looking at what Kyle's able to do with this and how quickly he's, getting acclimated again, and how quickly he's, piling up these numbers that I should be piling up in order to get the contract that I want.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I do think too, though, like if it is boiling down to that, like we can look back at that Rams game last year that I know nobody likes to talk about, but dude, Jennings was just ridiculous in that game at
Yeah,
SoFi. And so it's like one of those things where like we've seen when he needs to be that guy. Like, can you expect that over 17 games? Like, I don't think so.
no,
I don't think he's in that tier of receiver, but there will be a couple times a season where he can be a guy that you can funnel your offense through. And so I would hope that he's not losing confidence because of that. But it is a good point, because I do think a lot of people just expected like, oh, like Kendrick Bourne's coming back. Like, he's a guy that's familiar with the system. Maybe he'll get 2 or 3 targets a game. He's just somebody that you don't, will probably be able to absorb, um, you know, the scheme and the playbook. And, there's obviously been changes since he's been here last, but the root of the offense is still relatively the same. And so I'm sure nobody, probably Kendrick Bourne included, expected for
yeah,
him to have back-to-back 40-yard games. It's definitely one of the more like surprising performances I think we've seen just in the NFL this season, and he did it 2 weeks in a row. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't blame anybody in that locker room if they were kind of, especially in that receiver room, if they were like, how the hell did this happen? Like, this guy just
yeah.
walked in here and had 3 games, like.
What's funny is I started him those back to back weeks in fantasy, and jokes on you, I'm not a genius. I was just backed into a corner and I had to because I had nobody else. So that's how that works. So the last thing on this Juwan Jennings thing, do you think the 49ers should and will they look to shop him at the deadline?
I mean, I don't think they should. What the hell's going on with Ricky Pearsall's knee? Like, I don't think they're in any position to be getting rid of a guy that can contribute, especially. But we don't know when Ayuk's going to be back. We saw what the offense looked like when Kittle was gone. Kendrick Bourne has stepped in admirably, but who's going to be the next Kendrick Bourne to step in off the street? I don't know that
What's
there is a
Marquise
guy.
Goodwin doing?
At a certain point, it's like we're in the big 2025 now, and it's like, as great as it would be to have that nice reunion, if they want to win football games.
Come on, come on down, Trent Taylor. I mean, we thought you were going to be a Pro Bowler. It might be your time right now, huh?
And hey, they've done a good job of finding guys. Like I thought Chris Conley was a guy that was,
Yeah.
a good contributor for them for a couple seasons. I think his presence has been missed more than maybe, there's it's not the first problem with the team this year, but it's one of those things looking at it, it's like, yeah, him not being there, a solid vet, dependable. It's those losses start to add up over time. And so I would say no, I don't think they should shop Jennings unless it got to a point where it was so contentious that it just was like, hey, we need a clean break, we need to move on. You'd ideally like to do what you could to facilitate that not happening. But if you really feel like it's going to cause more harm than good having him around, even though you need the production, I don't think they're at a spot where they can, handle having a distraction like that. Like they need to be able to just move on if that's the case. I don't get the sense that it's that bad. But just purely from a production and X's and O's standpoint, like they need all the receiving. They might need to shop for a receiver at this point rather than give one up, depending on
Hmm.
what's going on with Pearsall. So yeah, I would say no. I don't think they can do it.
Yeah, I think if Pearsall was back after like 2 weeks from that, and he looked like himself, and there was nothing, I think maybe you really could get into this discussion, and feel like that. Depends on how they feel about Brandon Ayuk, which we could do another whole hour podcast about what the hell is going on with that because I have thoughts, I don't have rational thoughts about it, right? Like I have no idea what's really going on, but kind of wanted to get back to the pass rusher, trade talk, right? So do you feel like the 49ers are going to be in the market for, a Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, that type of guy? I really don't think Kayvon Thibodeau's on the table because, just for one being here, he's one of their best run defenders and they're like one of the worst run defenses in the league. He's still cost control for 2 years. They drafted him. Seems like Dexter Lawrence is the guy that's on the outs as opposed to him if you're talking about that crowded line. But where are you at? Do you think that the 49ers continue to make these moves for players that they can develop traits on, or do you think that they try to swing on somebody a little bit bigger who is cost controlled? Because that is part of their goal with who it is that they bring in is do we have them for this year and do we have them for next year, and is it going to cost us that much?
Yeah, I think it's tough. Like Jalen Phillips at UCLA was a really good pass rusher. I watched a lot of him when he was there, and I know he had some concussion issues early on in his career, but he's really kind of formed into a really solid player. The thing that gets me with guys like that, where they're winning most of their reps in a 3-4 front, where they are standing up a lot of the time when they are rushing, like, are you going to be able to get into a 3-point stance and, play in this wide nine front? Like, a lot of times, I don't think it's worth overthinking to the point where it's going to completely turn you off from a guy. And I think there's been plenty of players that have made that transition and, you find a way to work it up. And
Yeah,
hey,
but
coaches are getting a reason.
we've made the point about being miscast though, like so that's a fair point.
Yeah. So I do think that it is something where it's like, hey, do I envision him having a similar impact in this scheme where he's going to be asked to do different things? I think that's one of the things that's so appealing about Keion White is that while a lot of his edge rushing snaps, he was standing up, he was in this, front that's very different in New England compared to what Sala,
I
Kosaric,
think
and
you're
the
muted.
49ers are running. Oh, can you hear me?
I can't hear you right now.
How about now?
Do you want to hop back out and hop back in real quick?
Yeah,
Just
let me
yeah,
see.
I'll hold it down like until you come back or whatever. If you want to check it out, yeah. So Jordan's having some technical difficulties, but he'll be back. I'm sure he'll have it figured out. But yeah, I think again the whole talk like about oh they can hear him. Oh, all right, so he'll be back and then you can hear him. So then maybe it's just me. But yeah, the whole talk about like you really overthinking sometimes a scheme fit stuff like that, right? It is important because it is what we saw with Bryce Huff. It is what we saw with other guys and things like that, right? And then Huff gets here and he flourishes, in the time that he's here. So, it is kind of, it is a nuanced conversation when it comes to that because you can't. Let me put him back on. They were saying they can hear you, bro. Keep talking.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I was like, I said it was working on
They
my
can hear
end.
you. Let me
Oh,
see. It might be
okay.
me. Keep going though.
But yeah, like with Keon White, like he was winning a lot of these reps on the edge when he was standing up and he was, rushing from a position that maybe he wouldn't be in that same, spot with the 49ers. But we've also seen this year, like Saul has gotten a little bit more diverse in some of these fronts that they are calling. They had a 5-man front a couple weeks ago. Or sorry, it was a 4-man front, and they had a linebacker mugging the A gap. And they had Sam O and I think it was Huff drop into coverage off the edge, and it's like this. It's a very similar front to what Green Bay's doing with Jeff Halfley, and that's where Salah spent some time last year. So I don't think it's as cut and dry as it would have been a few years ago, where it was four down linemen, 3 point stance. A pretty cut and dry assignment for what you're going to expect. I do think there's a little bit more diversity that would allow you to add a player from a different scheme and kind of project how they would fit rather than just having it be a seamless transition. Um, I just don't think that they're going to land a big player at this point. To me, it just doesn't make sense unless you are getting a guy that you plan on kind of pairing with Bosa for the next couple seasons. Like if you want to make a big investment, like I know it's not going to happen because the Giants would never trade him, right? But if they were to get like a Brian Burns caliber player that you could envision pairing with Bosa for not just this, not you're not just having him fill in this year, but you're also like, okay, next year we could have a Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson type of tandem here that's going to, really be something we could build around. I just don't think that there's any player that's available that would be worth the cost, both financially and in draft capital, to get them. And I think the reason why Trey Hendrickson was so appealing and is so appealing to so many people is there is a clean out at the end of the season. They do have the cap space to absorb him now. And so if they were able to get him for a relatively moderate price, you could evaluate him the season in your system, extend him if you want, but you're not tied to him. You're not, stuck if it doesn't work out. But I also just don't think the Bengals are going to move him. I just don't. I don't see anybody getting him. I don't think it's
Yeah.
the 49ers not offering enough. I just think that people are going to call it like bargain bin, or they're going to call, they'll have whatever term they want to use for whatever it is. You're not going to get a blue chip player in the middle of the season. I think them getting McCaffrey the way they did kind of jaded the perception of how rare that is in the
Mm.
NFL. And I just don't think the Niners are going to be in that market for a player of that caliber. I'd love to be wrong about it, but
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've been explaining is like, does the other team get to say no or yeah? Do they get to like, or is it just, hey, I want Trey Hendrickson, send him on over? The Bengals are like, yes, sir. Like the other thing is, I understand wanting to get compensation for somebody who's probably going to move on next year, but you still have to sell tickets to your fan base. Like you still have to get guys to go to your games, right? This is a money making business. Nothing shows that you're waving the white flag more than anything and then trading your best player on one of the worst defenses, right? So this is the part that I continue to push to 49ers fans is, do these other teams have a say in these trades? Because if that's the case, Cleveland, send on over Miles Garrett and make sure you foot the bill. You pay all of it, and make sure you and just send him over and he'll play for us. Like that's kind of where we are, like where it's like, just because someone has someone that can help your team, just because someone is on another team that you want for your team, doesn't mean that that team has to do anything to help you, and doesn't mean that that team has to budge on anything. And it could be for a multitude of reasons. Like with the Giants, Kayvon Thibodeau is still somebody that they envision to be on their defensive line, and he's been really good this season, and he's cheap, and he's still on a fifth-year option. With Hendrickson, they've got to sell tickets. Like you still got to be able to sell tickets in a down year once Joe Burrow goes down. And Joe Flacco injected a little life. Obviously he might not play this week, but like we're losing sight of all that just because the 49ers need something doesn't mean that another team needs to do anything for you. And they just don't have to. So it's still going to be like, I'm still gonna, say it's gonna be Arden Key, which is again Tennessee not mortgaging one of their young players or anything like that for, it's somebody who's familiar, get him back, and everything. But I do think the 49ers are intent on Keion White, Cleveland Farrell, Arden Key, and with the idea, hey, we're bringing back Bryce Huff in a week. YGM's going to be here. We hope that, all of these moving parts on the defensive line can unlock Michael a little bit, like to the way that we saw earlier in the season. Obviously, Nick Bosa was there, but, you get a little bit more from Alfred Collins. You see a little bit more from that. You see a little bit more from CJ West. I really think that that's going to be their plan, because you can't have any games where the leading pressure getters on your defense are in the secondary. Like that's just not how things are going to, like, it's not a recipe for success, and that's not some big brain football talk, but yeah, I do think it is whatever you want to call it, bargain bin, veteran, low risk, high reward, whatever it is that you want to call it. I just, that big splash, let's see what I did there. That big splash is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. You know what keeps eating away at me? I was literally thinking about this last night, and when you mentioned Miles Garrett, it like brought it to the surface again. this close the 49ers were to getting this guy,
Yeah.
literally this close. And Chip Kelly, who had one of the worst seasons we've ever seen for a
Don't
49ers coach,
don't if you bring it up, you're
dude,
gonna activate the narrative. But go ahead, I'm gonna let you.
dude, he literally, they're down 7 points to the Rams, and
Yep.
they're 1-13,
Yep.
and they score a touchdown, and then go for, and like, I get it in the moment, like, yeah, dude, you want to win football games, and to feel good, you go for two, you get the 2 point conversion. They're going crazy. Zane Beatles gets that taunting penalty. They're going crazy in the end zone. They're finally going to win another game. The only team they beat all year. They beat the Rams week 1, and they beat them in week 16. And that 2 point conversion literally was the difference between Miles Garrett and Solomon Thomas. And hey, you can't look at every little thing, because who knows if they get Jimmy that year, who knows if they end up getting Bosa and Warner? Like, the domino effect it could have had is a lot different. But Miles
Butterfly
Garrett
effect.
is, dude, he's the best edge rusher of this generation. He's going
Yep.
to be one of the best edge rushers of all time when it's all
Yep.
said and done. And dude, literally a meaningless week 16 game and a 2 point conversion, like, just greedy,
Yeah.
bro. You want to go for two, but you can't. You can only win 2 games all season. But all of a sudden now here we are. And
There.
it drives me crazy to think about. I'm sorry, dude. Like,
No,
it
you're
drives
good.
me nuts.
It wasn't that Colin Kaepernick's last game in the NFL.
I think it was, yeah, because I don't think he played that game against Seattle the next week. Let me see. Uh, no, he played the next game
Oh, he played
against.
the next
That
game.
it
Okay.
was the
Okay.
next,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
next game against Seattle. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it was my last. It was my last memory of him in a 49ers uniform. It's just
It was
seeing
the
him
last
like
happy memory. Yeah, they
right.
lost
It's
to
just
Seattle
seeing
the
him
next
like
week.
this. It's like this in LA and everything. But yeah, you mentioned domino effect. It's like the butterfly effect, right? Of it is, you get Miles Garrett. What happens, right? Like, you obviously don't land on Bosa. Like, who knows where else you are, right? Like, that is the hardest part about, and you know what, I'm guilty of it, and you've seen me do it all the time. I'm guilty of it. Is I can't believe you drafted this guy instead of this guy. But going back like through all these drafts, like the cascading effect of I took someone this year. That means I don't need someone this year. But the person that you
Yeah,
got in the year when you didn't take that someone is like the best in the league. Like it'll drive you nuts if you go down the rabbit hole and you start to look back at like who you could have had and who you
yeah.
should have drafted, and you don't know what that means for someone that you draft later on and you don't get it. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. But I think it's funny about Miles Garrett too, because he talks about like I want to go somewhere where I want to win. Okay, man. Well, that didn't really coincide with you getting like the highest contract that you could, which I absolutely think you deserved. You just got it in Cleveland, and like, and now you get 5 sacks on Sunday against the New England Patriots against Drake May, who's been playing lights out football. He's been a joy to watch, and you lose by like 20 points. It was like the first time in NFL history. Miles Garrett, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry that they're wasting you, dude. It would have been really nice. Look, again, Cleveland, if you're listening, we need an edge rusher. Send on over Miles Garrett. We'll send you a 4th round pick, and you pick up the tab. It's a win-win for both of us, honestly. You get to keep paying him. He gets to play for us for free, and now we get to get the Super Bowl back on. Like, I really don't like see the downside for the Browns. If I were the Browns, I'd do it.
It's one of those things where this is why I think it's really important to like document like your thoughts pre-draft, and document like I want, because otherwise you're going to drive yourself crazy going back and being like, how did they not take this player? I wanted them to take this guy. It's really easy to go back in time and like, dude, people thought Solomon Thomas was going to be the next Aaron Donald, and like, I watched a ton of him at
John Lynch
Stanford. I
did.
thought that, yeah, I was totally fine with that pick. I wasn't up in arms or upset with it. I don't think I've ever been as happy for a 49ers draft pick as I was when they took Ruben Foster in that same draft. And so it's like it's really hard to know how these things are going to play out in the long run. I wanted the Niners to draft Quinnen Williams over Nick Bosa. Like, I don't think it would have been a terrible pick, but I think Bosa's obviously been the better player. So it's like one of those things where, yeah, there's nobody's ever going to be 100%. Nobody's ever going to get it right all the time. But when we go back and we look at just like, since like, I don't think there's any reality that exists where the Niners get the number one pick that year and they don't take Miles Garrett, right? Like, I don't think that's
Hmm.
one where it's like, oh, it could have gone a bunch of different ways. Like, no, dude, they were going to take Miles Garrett. He was just a as can't miss of a there's no such thing as a can't miss prospect, but he was as close as it could be coming out of Texas A&M.
Close enough to
Uh,
generational.
yeah, no, he's a generational player, dude, and it's one of the, and it's like you're at the point now where you're like, oh, he probably will start slowing down a little bit. No, let me just go get 5 sacks while my
No.
team loses by 20 points. Like, it's wild, dude. Like, and on the flip side of it too, like, I do think that there are certain instances where it's like, okay, like they took Reuben Foster, it didn't end up working out, right? But that allowed them to spend money in free agency on Quan Alexander. And we saw, even though Quan Alexander had that injury during the Super Bowl year, and obviously wasn't there for a long time, his impact on Fred Warner and Dre and some of those guys and that whole defense, he gave that defense an identity. He gave that defense a heartbeat. He had those guys believing in each other. He gave them something that you can't quantify in a stat sheet or with a trophy or any of these things. And so, you got to just make do with what you got. And I think they've done a pretty good job of making do with that. But having said all of that, they'd be in a way better position if they took Miles Garrett that year. And Chip Kelly robbed us of Miles Garrett, dude. He literally came here, had the worst season ever, and robbed us of Miles Garrett, dude. So I don't know how else to put it, dude. And it seems, I have a lot of friends and a lot of family that are Raiders fans. They're not thrilled with him right now either. So he's
Brock Bowers fantasy manager right here. Like I'm not having a good time here, And then speaking of Quan Alexander, I think what a lot of people forget is him coming back from the injury when they put together that video of the baby and everything. Like
dude.
that's
That's one of the
horror right there.
best social media posts I've ever seen. From the 49ers social team deserved a ring that season more than anybody. I would argue more than anybody on the team for that. That video had people ready to run through a wall. Or if you remember the when he was still hurt, they played the Packers on Sunday night. The first game too, they thrashed the Packers twice that year, but the Sunday night game in the regular season, they had Quan on the like foghorn that they do before the game. And dude, I remember watching that in my room. Like I wanted to run through a wall, and he was sitting in a sling still. Just the energy that guy brought was ridiculous. And to me, he'll always have a special place when you're talking about the history of the San Francisco 49ers because of his impact on that team. And that team was special for a lot of reasons. But I think the just belief they had in each other and the fact that it was so unexpected. Like we were all hoping, 10 wins, maybe a wild card berth, kind of start building towards something. And they're the best team in the league from start to finish. And, a couple plays go differently. They're Super Bowl champions. Like that team's always going to be a special one for me.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's about to be 9 o'clock. Thank God my liquor store is still open because I'm gonna go drink now. Thinking about that, Jordan. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Shout out to everybody in here. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, all of that. Jordan, tell everybody where they can find your stuff besides being a run stuffing defensive tackle for the San Francisco 49ers.
Really quickly on the way out, the other Jordan Elliott, the superior Jordan Elliott, he's been having a hell of a season this year. I think that he is playing as good as he's played over the last couple of years he's been with
He
the
has.
Niners, and I think he's really hitting his stride. So I'm hoping the ankle injury isn't going to be anything that's going to be detrimental long term because he looks like the player that he was in Cleveland and the reason why the Niners went out and got him. So shout out to the better version of Jordan Elliott. I hope he's healing up and feeling better. But yeah, I'm still writing stuff on NBC Sports Bay Area. It's not just 49ers stuff. We cover all six teams here in Northern California. So if you're a 49ers fan, a Giants fan, Warriors fan, A's fan, Sharks fan, Kings fan, we're covering all those teams. I work with a fantastic group of people there, and I could not be more blessed as somebody who's from the area and grew up watching all these teams. Obviously, the Warriors are off to a hot 4-1 start. Everybody's really excited about it. If you want to help me out personally, I would say please follow all of our social accounts too. Our Instagram account, we have a lot of highlights, a lot of fun stuff going on there. Original graphics. Our graphic art team is really good. Our TikTok, we're posting a lot of stuff to there. If you're a Warriors fan, you want to see some Warriors highlights after a game, you can definitely find it there. And then I will say one more thing really quickly. I have an exclusive that I'm working on from an interview I did with Trent Williams last week that I'm really excited about.
Hell
That
yeah.
should be coming soon. So keep an eye out for that one, and I definitely will hope it delivers the level of excitement that I have for anybody who's reading it.
Hell yeah, that's exciting, man. Like I love that. Again, like dude, from very humble beginnings to something that you absolutely deserve and that you've worked for, man. And I'm so happy to watch you, grow and everything as well too. Before I let you get out of here, there's one thing I wanted to find first, but I'm gonna ask you, and you're an aficionado on this. You've been in a few arguments when it comes to this. The Mount Rushmore of Bay Area athletes. Is Steph Curry on
Oh,
it?
dude, Steph Curry is the Mount Rushmore. Steph Curry literally, you could literally erase the three other people and it could be just Steph Curry. And I say that as somebody who loves Barry Bonds. And this Barry Bonds versus like Shohei Ohtani beef is like
I
incredible.
kind
I
of was
love it.
going there with this one,
Yeah.
but but baseball hasn't been a real sport for me in a long time. So
Same. Yeah. And it's not the players themselves, obviously, like the fan bases of each. For me, if I'm making a Mount Rushmore of Bay Area player, like, and this is where it's really hard because there's going to be multiple players from one team, and you're going to have to find some leeway. Steph Curry absolutely is on it, and I will say this because he united the entire region. There are people who are Raiders fans, or maybe who are A's fans that aren't Giants fans, Raiders fans who aren't Niners fans. Doesn't matter. Steph Curry not only united this region, he took the war. Dude, the Warriors were a joke my entire life before Steph Curry got there.
Mm.
I loved watching them. I still went, and to be honest with you, I could afford to go a lot more often when it was the case when they were terrible. And Steph Curry turned them into a piece of NBA history that will live on forever and turn them into a dynasty and made them a global brand. Like when I travel like internationally now and I have Warrior stuff on, like people know what that is. If I did that 20 years ago, people would be like, what the hell is that? They wouldn't recognize that logo. That's Steph Curry doing that. So for a million reasons that I don't want to waste anybody's time or rant on about it forever. Steph Curry is absolutely there. I would also say Barry Bonds is there. I think Barry Bonds is the greatest baseball player to ever live. I think that Barry Bonds has a statistical debate that just really shuts down any counter argument beyond the steroids thing. And this is where the steroids thing drives me crazy, Jason, because if he was the
Yeah,
only person using steroids and he was an isolated incident, fair game.
maybe.
He was cheating. We could have that discussion. Not fair. I still
Never
think what
failed
he
the test.
did, yeah, never failed the test. I still think, even let's say hypothetically he was using steroids and hypothetically he was the only one doing it, I still think his accomplishments are very impressive because of it. But we all know the pitchers were on it. A good majority of the league was on it. And when it suited the league and it suited the people covering the league, everybody kind of turned a blind eye. And now all of a sudden it's, used against a player like that. So if you're a hitter and you're on steroids and you're playing against pitchers that are on steroids, to me, that's a wash.
Yeah.
It's canceled out. And we do know, like to me, one of the greatest at bats I've ever seen. Barry Bonds, Eric
Eric
Gagne. Eric
Gagne.
Gagne was incredible. A closer winning the Cy Young, even though he played for the Dodgers. I know a lot of Giants fans have no love for Eric Gagne. That was one of the most incredible at bats you'll ever see. This guy's pumping 100, 101, this nasty changeup, that nasty breaking ball he's throwing, and they're battling. And then Barry hits the home run off him after I think it was like a 6, 7 pitch at bat.
Hmm.
That to me is much more enjoyable than the baseball I've watched the last few years. And I don't know if it's just nostalgia driving it, but okay. So Stephen Barry, and then this is where it gets really interesting because I think Jerry Rice being the greatest receiver ever and just being a player, the player he was for the duration that he was, and again the statistical numbers that he put up, I would take a Jerry Rice over a Joe Montana. Like I
Wow.
personally think that Jerry Rice belongs on there. And again, I'm saying this as somebody who's 30 years old. So if somebody's older and they watch both and they think I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about, like it's fair. I didn't watch Joe
Like that's
Montana, so
fair.
I can't sit here and pretend like I saw Joe Montana do all these spectacular things he did. I watched enough of Jerry Rice growing up that I got a sense for the player he was. Um, I just think that when you are the undisputed GOAT at your position, and when you are somebody that has the longevity that he has, it's really hard to leave him off. So I have Barry, Steph, and Jerry, right? And this is the hardest part, Jason, is like, so then it's like, okay, easy. Well, Joe Montana gets in too. What about Willie Mays?
Ooh.
What about the Say Hey Kid? Willie Mays, for a long time, is viewed by a lot of people. I know our dads have talked about this before, like for a lot of people, Willie Mays was the greatest baseball player
My
ever, the
father still
ultimate five
says
tool player.
my father, we had an argument not that long ago. I want to say it was probably week 1 when he came over and watched the Niners game with me. And I said I thought Barry Bonds was the greatest baseball player ever, and he said he's how can you say that over Willie Mays? He still believes that to this day.
And there's a lot of people that feel that way, and I don't think you could really fault them. And especially for him to do what he was doing at a time where nobody else really had that ability to field, the speed, the power, the average. Like he did everything, and he did it for a really long time too. So for like me personally, like I would probably lean Willie Mays over Joe Montana. But if somebody had Joe Montana, I wouldn't fault them. The one that drives me crazy though, Jason, is people want to leave Steph Curry off of this list. You
You
cannot
can't.
leave Steph Curry off of this list. And one of the things I love about being around the Warriors and Niners and covering these teams is that there are fans from all over that support these teams. And I am one of the people that I think it doesn't matter where you're from if you root for a team. If you feel a connection to a team, even if you've never stepped foot in the Bay Area and you're a Warriors or a Niners fan, I, I,
Where's this guy?
I,
Where's this guy rank on the Bay Area?
oh man.
I've been trying to
Oh man.
I've been trying to hold it back and not laugh, but I just
I'll be honest, I've had a lot of fun moments working for NBC. The night that we posted that as the Giants were like a horrible free fall. I forget how many games in a row they'd lost. That was a shining light in a moment where I think a lot of people needed it. Rich has no idea the impact he had on just a massive amount of struggling Giants fans, dude. He literally,
Dude, first of all right, the first comment is me, and it's just no way, man. And it's look, it's Rich falling back as Vince McMahon on his old account or whatever. It's Patrick. That's history right there. You understand? It's Jake who gave Jordan the login. It's Andrew. No way, man.
I'll tell you a quick story. So that night in the office, I was at my desk cackling, and one of the engineers that runs the show there, is one of the people you can thank for getting to watch Warriors and Niners and Giants, all these teams. He was like, dude, I've never heard you laugh like that. And anybody who knows me, like, I like to joke around a lot. I like to have a lot of fun.
Right,
He's like, dude, I've never heard you. Like, what is going on? And I'm like, I don't even know where to begin explaining this. Like,
right.
I don't even, it's just,
It's
I
if
literally
you
was
know,
like,
you know, dude.
yeah, dude.
Picture picture me. I'm here. I'm here, and I'm sitting here, and I'm bouncing between the group chats, like just laughing because it's perfect. And it's just what's funny is how many people recognize that it was Rich right away. But that picture, which is a picture of Rich with his daughter on his neck, which is supposed to be something that's really happy, and looks like he's literally dying inside. Oh my god, dude! And that's when we knew that I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, Jordan, you maniac! Like, how did you get this done?
I'll tell you what, we've been having a lot of fun on socials over there. Anybody who follows our accounts, hopefully you guys are enjoying it as much as we are. But we've been trying to have some fun and lean into some stuff like that. Especially, nobody wants to watch their baseball team struggle for 10
Right.
games. And so there's enough overlap with Niners and Giants fans on Twitter that I'm like, okay, people will get this reference. It might be, maybe every single Giants fan isn't going to get it, but the ones that do, this one's really going to hit home. And I think
Yeah.
I think it did. Selfishly for me, it was hilarious, but I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did.
No, it's a banger. I gotta bring it back. It's in my bookmarks, and I guarantee you, I'm bringing it back like out of nowhere. Like, you know what I want to do, and I want to find somebody who can help me do it. Do you know the video of Lala like FaceTiming her son with Mello or whatever, like she's
I
pointing
don't
the
think I've
camera.
seen it.
Okay, all right. So there's one where like Lala's doing like this, where and Melo's trying to FaceTime his son while he's playing. I want what's on the phone to be
Just a
the
picture
Rich
of
Richard.
Rich.
Yeah. You know what? The perfect time is one of the games where obviously I don't know. You probably could sweep us, but we open the season in San Francisco. If one of those games goes the Yankees' way, I'm letting the cat out the bag right now. Like, this is exactly where I'm going with the mean Jordan. I appreciate you, my boy. It's been too long, man. We got to do this way more often, man. And you're just doing an amazing job, man. I'm so proud of you, man, and you deserve it all. Again, you told everybody where they could find you and everything as well too. Do you have any radio hits, anything like that coming up or anything going on?
Um, I did last night. I don't know if it's probably up somewhere. I did KMBR with Larry Krueger last night. I will do Niners nightly with him every so often. I think I've done it the last few weeks. So I usually try to let people know if I'm doing that on my Twitter or whatever. But yeah, usually Niner stuff with him, and occasionally I'll sprinkle in some Warriors and stuff like that. But they're keeping me busy, man. I've stretched pretty thin right now in a good way. It's been fun. So
Yeah. Hell
I
yes,
always
Steph.
appreciate getting to do these, dude.
Steph the goat. I know somebody who really loves him that really hates me right now. That'll end this show, and we'll be back tomorrow. I'll have another guest in the Friday Sprint Right option. We're gonna be talking about Giants and Niners, but I'm gonna get out of here, guys. Thank you for joining, and as always, let's go Niners.